There's a lot of people here in St. Peter's Square. As you can see, there were a lot of people anyway because this is Holy Week, it's Easter Monday, it's national holiday, so a lot of pilgrims, it's Jubilee year, so a lot of pilgrims were here already. But since the Vatican has announced the death of Pope Francis early this morning, we have seen a lot more people coming here to pay their respects, to pray for Pope Francis, and throughout the day we do expect many more. Of course, this is only the start of a long process that the Vatican has laid out very clearly. The body of Pope Francis is going to be lying in state inside St. Peter's Basilica in a couple of days from now. We do expect very long queues of pilgrims wanting to pay their last respects. Also between 4 and 5 days from now, they'll hold a funeral for Pope Francis in St. Peter's Square, and then in 15 to 20 days they will hold a conclave where cardinals will be called to choose the next pontiff, Leah.
Claudio, he was a pope described as the people's pope, the human leader. And during his 5 weeks in hospital, people were there, the faithful were there. How are they reacting today?
I remember talking to indigenous elders.
Well, people are in shock, to be honest, because yesterday, just 24 hours ago, there were tens of thousands of pilgrims here in St. Peter's Square. I was here, as with many other journalists, witnessing how Pope Francis made yet another surprise appearance. He was not scheduled to appear because he was still recovering from pneumonia, but he managed to appear on that balcony on the central loggia of the St. Peter's Basilica behind me to wish everyone a happy Easter. He looked weak, as he's looked in the last few months, but certainly there were signs, at least, that his health was improving. He was not wearing those nose tubes that he used to get this oxygen intake to help him breathe, so we kind of thought that was a good sign. Also, he got on the Pope Mobile for the first time since he left hospital more than a month ago to tour St. Peter's Square among this ecstatic crowd. So that kind of led us to believe that he was improving, his health was improving. So this news this morning came even more as a shock to not only us, but to Catholics around the world, of course, Leah.
And Claudio, we've been reflecting here in the studio about his legacy, about how he was a progressive pope, and that, in many ways, leads back to his childhood growing up in Argentina.
Well, absolutely, Leah. This was a progressive pope who kind of laid out what his papacy was going to be right from the start. In 2013, when he was elected pope, he took I was there with him on the plane to and from Brazil for World Youth Day, literally a few months later, and he said that famous word when they asked him about gay Catholics. He said, well, who am I to judge? And that's pretty much how he lived and he served as pastor, as pope here in Rome, as the leader of the Catholic world. He was open. He's at the top of the agenda was his openness towards everyone, towards, of course, the LGBT community, towards transgenders, towards the minorities, towards for the interfaith dialogue with other religions. This was a pope for openness who said, who am I to judge, from the beginning of his papacy, and kept that line true towards the end of it. Just yesterday, in his apostolic message that he had someone else read out because he couldn't, he once again, for instance, touched on that very specific topic that he really cared about, immigrants. He said, not only he called for peace in the world, of course, but he also said, well, let me warn you against contempt against migrants. And he was referring also, of course, to several policies around the world that are, discriminating against migrants. And not by coincidence, the last world leader he met, basically, yesterday was J.D. Vance, the U.S. Vice President, who just saw him for a few minutes to wish each other Happy Easter, and that, of course, it comes from an administration that has clamped down on migrants massively, the Trump administration. So he has, despite the advice from the doctors that he should have stayed away from people and children for at least 2 months after he left hospital, he kind of followed that only for 1 week, and then he started, showing up everywhere, meeting the flock, meeting the people, meeting the children, because that's what Pope Francis and who Pope Francis was, as you said, the people's pope. and he stayed and remained the people's pope, despite the risks that appearing so much in public carried with his appearances. He just decided to be among the flock until the very last moments of his life, clearly, Leah.
And Claudio, you were well aware of the Pope's legacy over the years. I wonder your reflections on knowing him, on interviewing him, how he's changed over the years, and in particular, how he handled the criticism, despite being that progressive Pope that we all knew that he was.
Leah, I've followed Pope Francis from the very beginning, and I've also followed him to his trips around the world. I've been to more than 40 countries around the world with him, and what I saw was a Pope that slowly kind of lost his naivety. At the beginning, as I said, he was, openness was at the top of his agenda. He believed also his inner circle when he was dealing, for instance, with sexual abuse within the Catholic Church, that is also clamped down on. The one moment that I think he changed, for instance, was during his trip to Chile. It was many years ago, it was before COVID, and back then there was this massive scandal, sex abuse scandal there, and he believed the bishops there who told him, oh no, it's not true that we covered it up. And then after his trip, he came back to the Vatican, and more proof came that the bishops in Chile covered up sexual abuse. He called them all up here to the Vatican and fired basically many of them. And that's when he started changing, because he realized that his own inner circle, his own, the people within the Catholic Church were the first sinners in a way, and he lost. Back then, it kind of felt like he lost that naivety, but also brought upon new rules that allow the Catholic Church to go after people in power in the Catholic Church, like bishops, who, if found to be covering up major issues like sexual abuse within the Catholic Church, they also were meant to pay for it. So let's say that is the one moment that I saw Pope Francis change, but certainly he always stuck to his principles, and that's one of the legacies that he's going to leave for the future, and hopefully for the future Pope as well.